Just a quick introduction about the Flows to Bay program. Started in 1990, our sole purpose, motivation, and motivation to everything we do is to make sure that we're reducing pollution carried by stormwater into our local creeks, the bay, and of course, our ocean. Next slide. The main thing that we focus on is public outreach. So we work with residents, businesses, and we love working with schools as well to make sure everyone understands what they can do in terms of playing a part for preventing stormwater pollution. And of course, protecting your watershed. Next slide. A watershed is land that water flows over through, and on its way to a creek or to the bay or to the ocean, everything that water picks up is carried along with it. And everyone lives in a watershed, which means everyone can play a part in stormwater pollution prevention. And it affects everything. Water quality affects habitat, it affects fish, birds, and of course it affects us humans. And just consider a watershed like a great big funnel that collects water and then carries it along to larger waterways and water bodies. Water pollution degrades surface waters and makes it unsafe for drinking, fishing, swimming, and other activities that we do. So our sole purpose is just to really make people understand the little actions that they can take to help. For example, next slide. Understanding how using pesticides can affect people who are swimming and the habitat living in the waterways as well. Everything from littering to using pesticides or other chemicals outdoors can really affect water quality. Next slide. I also want to make sure that you guys mark your calendars. We have some great webinars coming up every month until December. Next month, we're talking about rain gardens, the design, the construction, and the maintenance of it. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be exciting. Rain barrels is up next, where we're talking about rain water harvesting, why you'd want to do it, and if a rain barrel is right for you. We'll also be talking about the new San Mateo County rebate for rain barrels. Very exciting stuff. And then again, come back in December 5th, where we have Charlotte hosting another winter gardening and pest management webinar. Next slide. I'd now like to introduce our friend Cleo from the San Mateo RCD.
Thanks, Susie. So I'm Cleopatra Tude. I'm a biologist with the San Mateo Resource Conservation District. We are your local special district, which is a form of local government, much like a school district or fire district, except for education or fire, we work in natural resources. So we've been around since 1939, started by the community for the community. So we help mostly coastal San Mateo County, but we also work kind of on the bay side too. So if you have any natural resource need, we are there to help you. We provide free, non-regulatory, confidential technical assistance to get you the help that you need to help conserve your land, whether that's thinking about water, agriculture, climate, habitat, or fire. We will help you with all of those. We also do boots on the ground projects. So a couple of things that we do are things like watershed restoration, integrated pest management, specifically looking at invasive species, creek habitat enhancement, and water quality monitoring along our coast sides. Next. I also wanted to let you guys know about a couple of local technical resources that you guys can utilize. First, like I've been saying, you can reach out to your local San Mateo Resource Conservation District. Check out our website at sanmateorcd.org. I also really highly recommend reaching out to the County Department of Agriculture Weights and Measures. They have a pest detection program. So if you're looking at a new bug that you've never seen before, you're trying to find it online and you're like, I've never seen this before, reach out to them. They're really good at trying to find new pests that come into our county. I also really recommend checking out the UC Cooperative Extension. They have some amazing educational resources I think Charlotte's going to mention them later today as well as your master gardener. You have a local master gardener. They have an amazing hotline on the UC Cooperative Extension. So thank you so much, Susie. I'll leave the rest to you.
Now, without further ado, I do want to present our presenter and pest expert, Charlotte Kenner, who is a Our Water, Our World advocate. Charlotte?
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. Thank you to Flows to Bay and San Mateo County, and thank you all out there for joining me this Saturday morning. I am an integrated pest management advocate. I work in partnership with Flows to Bay and Our Water, Our World in San Mateo County, and I work in other counties as well in the Bay Area. I'll be sharing my information later with you, and you can always reach out to me anytime with questions. So what we're going to learn today, we're going to go through some overview of IPM, the steps that it involves, and then at the end I will be touching on 2 common pests that you'll see this season, which would be ants and snails and slugs. And then at the end we'll have some Q&A, so bring your pest questions. So today we're going to learn the principles of organic gardening through the lens of IPM, why working with the integrated pest management approach will overall lead to fewer pest problems in your home and garden, and how your home and garden is a dynamic ecosystem, and the choices that we make within that ecosystem have a wider reach in your community and your local waterways. A little bit about Our Water, Our World. It's a program designed to bring awareness between pesticides and water quality and provide pest problem-solving education. Our Water, Our World partners with about 200 hardware stores and nurseries in about 23 counties in California. And in San Mateo County, we partner with 10 stores, including 4 Home Depots. In the stores that we partner with, you'll see the fact sheets, like a rack, like on the left side of the screen, a rack that has different sheets that describe different pests and how to manage them, and also how to have a healthy garden, healthy roses, or lawn. Also in the stores, you'll see shelf talkers, like the ones on the bottom middle and on the right. Some products will have these little tags on them that will signal to the consumer that those products are more eco-friendly. And you can find all of the fact sheets on the Our Water, Our World website, ourwaterourworld.org, and also you can get a list of eco-friendly products. So let's dive in. What is integrated pest management? Basically, it is a decision-making process. It is a science-based approach that looks at the system or environment as a whole. A lot of times when we have a problem, what we're really looking at is a symptom of a larger problem. And so what we need to do is take a step back and figure out what really is the issue. When we figure out what that issue is, we have to decide, can we live with it? Some problems, pest life cycles or issues are short-lived, or they don't cause a lot of damage, so sometimes we can just live with it. But if we do need to take some action, then we decide how we approach it. And there are a few different types of actions or controls that we take in IPM. Cultural, mechanical, biological, and then chemical, always as a last resort. That would be pesticides. We want to avoid those at all costs. And then of course, another decision to be made in the integrated pest management process is sometimes a plant will just have chronic problems, always struggling with pest issues or not thriving. And in that case, we want to make sure that we give ourselves the permission to just remove the plant. It'll be better for us, it'll be better for the garden. Here's another representation of IPM and the steps that we take. One note about this diagram, I put prevention as number 1. Really, we should be putting prevention first. There are a lot of things that we can put in place in our garden and in our home to prevent pests from even coming in or causing problems. After prevention, we want to identify the problem and monitor it. Then we evaluate the problem. We decide, is the damage too much or can we tolerate it? We have to decide what our threshold is. If we need to take action, we take some action steps, which we'll discuss later. And then after taking action steps, we want to monitor the problem and see if it went away or if we need to implement some new action steps. Here's another representation of IPM in the form of a pyramid. Of course, prevention is the foundation of IPM, so it's at the bottom. Then moving up through some, starting with the least aggressive control, which would be cultural control. That is really bolstering the health of the garden. And then we move up to physical and mechanical controls, which is using the tools we have or barriers that we have in our garden. Then we have biological controls, which is really inviting beneficial insects. And then lastly, at the top, smaller than everything else because we want to use it as little as possible, would be chemical controls or pesticides. So prevention is key because a healthy, balanced environment and healthy plants will not attract pests. And if a plant does get attacked by pests, a healthy plant can fend off an attack a lot easier than a sick plant. Much like the human body, a healthy body can defend itself against illness, and then when it does have an illness, it can recover faster, faster than a weakened or a stressed body. So prevention can take a lot of different forms. We have to see what it looks like in your garden or home. So we look at what tools can we implement for prevention. This could be if you're in a deer-prone area and you're able to, you can install a deer fence, which would be about an 8-foot fence. Or it could be adding other barriers in your garden before any pests show up, like a row cover. Timing of management action is really important, and this would be understanding seasonal pests, like yellow jackets in the summer. We want to get the yellow jacket traps out early in hopes that we can capture the queen, and then that will decrease population. Water and fertilizing management is incredibly important in prevention. It is key to healthy plants. Inadequate watering, too much or too little, will cause stress to a plant, which invites pest problems. So prevention could look like setting up an irrigation system that will give your plant the appropriate amount of water consistently. Also, switching from synthetic fertilizers to a slow-release organic fertilizer and amending your soil with compost. And then lastly, sanitation is always a great method of prevention. If you have fruit trees, you want to clean up the fallen fruit as soon as it hits the ground so as to avoid attracting rodents, yellow jackets, and other pests. So after prevention, we want to, if we do have a pest, we want to properly identify the pest. And this is, it's really hard to do. It's really easy to misidentify the pest. And I'm going to give you some resources on the next slide that will help you. So we want to identify the pest. We want to make sure that what we're looking at is actually a bad bug or some sort of bad pest, as opposed to a beneficial insect or creature. For example, the caterpillar on the screen is a black swallowtail butterfly caterpillar. It also looks like a monarch butterfly caterpillar, both good pollinators that we want to, in the garden. They do look somewhat similar to a caterpillar like the tomato hornworm, which is also green and has stripes, and that caterpillar can decimate tomato plants. So we really want to be careful that what we're looking at is an actual pest and not a beneficial. We want to understand the life cycle of the pest. Some life cycles are very short and maybe we can just wait them out. Understanding the habitat and timing of the pest, what plants attract certain pests and when do they arrive. So if we know that we're going to get early spring aphids, which a lot of people do, maybe we want to apply a dormant season horticultural oil spray during the dormant season to prevent that. Excuse me. And then lastly, we want to find what are the natural enemies of the pest. Maybe they're already in the garden and they're going to do the work for us. So we want to look for those natural enemies, and if they're not already in the garden, we want to invite them in by creating a habitat that they like. And then when we are looking for natural enemies, We want to avoid, and if we do have good bugs in the garden, we do want to avoid all pesticides, including the eco-friendly ones. So here are two resources that I highly recommend to help both identify the pests in your garden and how to deal with them. As I said, the Our Water, Our World website, ourwaterourworld.org, has all of the fact sheets. There's about 18 different ones. Some of them are also in Spanish. They're all in PDF form on our website. And then also there's a really great tool. If you have a specific question, you can use the Ask Our Expert tool, which will help you send an email to BIRC, the Biointegral Resource Center, which is in the East Bay. They're a team of entomologists and chemists that can answer specific pest questions for you. And they answer your questions within 24 hours, Monday through Friday. Also, the UCIPM website, which Cleo already mentioned. I use this website all the time. It's an incredible resource. What I like a lot about it, they have a huge pest database, notes on everything, and notes specific to lawn and different types of plants. What I like is this tool. If you don't know what you're looking at, but maybe you know what plant it is or not, they have something like a WebMD symptom tracker that will allow you to use the clues. What type of damage is there? A frass or insect poop, or some other clues that you can see what time of year it is, to narrow down the possible suspects that is in your garden. So let's start with some action steps. Cultural controls are really similar to prevention. It's all about promoting a healthy garden, bolstering the health of the garden, creating a really good habitat for your plants and the beneficial insects, and then making a less desirable habitat for pests. So first, soil. Everything starts in the soil. We want really healthy soil, so we're going to amend our soil with compost. That just means mixing compost into your soil when you're planting, using organic fertilizers, not synthetics, and using mulch. So compost is super important. It adds nutrients to your soil. It reuses resources because it's made of other plants already. And it improves soil texture, which will help your roots grow, and it holds more precipitation and keeps the moisture in the soil longer. And here's some fertilizers and composts that we recommend that you can find in stores. Some cities do have compost giveaways. I believe Rethink Waste usually hosts a compost giveaway once a month in a city in San Mateo County, and you can see the Flows to Bay calendar for more information on that. And then we really want to switch to organic fertilizers and get away from synthetic fertilizers. Synthetics are made of petroleum and fossil fuels, and they're very high in salt. Also, synthetics give your plant a jolt of energy that will shoot out some soft, tender, new sweet growth that pests really like. They're attracted to the soft growth. It's sweet, and they can eat it easily. We want to avoid that using organics. I like to explain the difference between the two. Synthetics is like feeding your plant a Red Bull, or it's like drinking a Red Bull, whereas an organic fertilizer is more like eating an apple. It's going to be sustained energy over time and not just give you that jolt and then a crash. What we want is slow release fertilizer to give your plants a nice sustained energy and nutrients. And also organics break down faster in the environment, which is what we want. We don't want them to persist. Synthetic fertilizers can persist in the environment, which can cause them to get into waterways, and sometimes when they're in the waterways, it builds up and can cause algae blooms and it can create a toxic environment to marine life. So also with soil, I love this topic, but I'll try to keep it short. I could talk about soil all day. Healthy soil is living soil. what we want is to nurture the life in the soil, the bacteria, the fungi, the microbes. All of these work hard to support your plant. And how we can support this life is by adding compost and not using pesticides that kill pretty much everything. Mycorrhizal fungi is essential for your plant. It plugs into the root system of your plant and it pumps water and nutrients into your plant. And also mycorrhizal fungi can actually, it helps in pulling carbon out of the air and into the soil, and locking it into the soil, sequestering it there, and that's where we want our carbon. So mulch is an amazing tool. Mulch is really any protective layer on the soil. It can be made out of rubber chips or oyster shells. When I usually talk about mulch, I'm referring to bark or wood chips, because when bark or wood chips breaks down, it adds nutrients to the soil and it feeds soil organisms. Adding that protective layer on your soil will keep weeds from germinating. It protects the water in the soil, so it reduces evaporation, and it keeps your soil cool in the summer and warmer in the winter, which also helps protect your roots also from getting too warm or too cool. Two things to note on mulch. We want to keep the mulch away from the crown of a tree or from the stem of your plant. We just clear it out a little bit, give your plants a little space from the mulch. Too much, if you have mulch right at the plant, it will cause too much moisture buildup, which could cause fungus or mold. Another thing to note when you are working with mulch is that we want to do our best to keep it on site. If you brush it off into the sidewalk or into the street, make sure that you sweep it up. If you have a bunch of mulch delivered in your driveway and you don't use it right away, try to tarp it so it doesn't blow away. We really want to keep the mulch on the soil on site and not into the street, because that will get into the waterways and can clog up the sewer system. Picking the right plant for your site is super important and will help you have less stress and easier to deal with plants. We live in a really unique environment in the Bay Area and in California. We're in a Mediterranean climate where there's no rain in the summer and hopefully rain in the winter. And the California natives and Mediterranean plants are well suited for that environment. So they're already going to thrive better than some other ones. So make sure that you're getting plants that will suit your site. Observe your site. How much sun do you get? What's your soil type? And take note of that. And then when you are at the nursery, look at the plant. Each plant will have a tag that will tell you what water needs it needs, what sun it needs, and what size it will get. We don't want to put a plant in a too small of a space. It'll get stressed and be susceptible to pests. And again, if you have a plant that's just always struggling and it's driving you crazy, you have to give yourself the permission to just remove the plant. It'll be easier. And here are a few plant lists that I would recommend if you're looking for suitable plants for your area. The Basco Plant List, the Yerba Buena chapter, it's the California Native Plant Society chapter, and the UC Arboretum All-Stars. That is a searchable database that you can use to find the plant that's right for you. And all these resources will be sent to you in a email after the webinar. So water. Water is extremely key in a healthy plant. Overwatering a plant is actually the #1 reason that plants die, and also underwatering your plant, of course, can also lead to stress. So we want to make sure that we're watering deeply and infrequently. Watering deeply is important because we want the water to go down deep into the soil and the roots will follow it. And an extensive deep root system will lead to a healthier plant. It will have more access to nutrients. And infrequently, we want the top 1 or 2 inches of the soil to dry out between waterings. Also with trees, the same idea. We don't want to be watering right at the base, the crown of the tree, at the trunk. We want to expand the irrigation to be more at the drip line of the trees. And then of course, as the tree grows, we want to expand that. That'll force the roots to go out and down and deeper into the ground for a stronger base. When planning a big landscape project, try to plant in the fall. New plants need a lot more water than established plants. So hopefully the rain will come and will offer you some free irrigation. And then Susie mentioned a few rebates. There are rain barrel rebates and rebates for removing lawn in the San Mateo County, and you can find more information about that on the Flows to Bay website. Drip irrigation systems are incredibly useful in supplying your plants with the appropriate amount of water consistently. They apply water right at your plant, right on the soil. So that means the plant is getting what it needs. It's going right into the soil, so there's less evaporation, and there will be less weeds because it's not a sprinkler where the water is just going everywhere and watering where we don't want it. And you can set the timer for early in the morning when the air is cooler, so that there will be less evaporation. And then you can also set it for multiple times during the day to make sure your plants are getting deep watering. And remember, with these systems, they're not set it and forget it. As I said, new plants need a lot more water than established plants. And then throughout the year, we might want to adjust it. When it gets really hot, we might want to add watering times. And once the rain comes, we want to either slow the irrigation or maybe even turn it off. So make sure you're checking your system, look for leaks, make sure your plants are actually getting the water where you want it to, and check the soil. Is it too wet, too dry? We really want to keep our water on site, especially in a climate like ours where it does rain infrequently. And there are a few ways to do that. The rain barrel, which you can learn about in the upcoming webinar, and then also adding permeable surfaces to your garden, which would be pavers, bricks, decomposed granite, mulch. These are all surfaces that rain can come and soak down through into the soil, where it can help the microbes in the soil. It can help your plant roots. Also, when water goes through a permeable surface, and instead of rushing off into the storm drains, it allows the water to be cleaned and detoxified through the soil, and then it can recharge the aquifers instead of rushing off into the storm drain, bringing whatever toxins and debris with it. And then lastly, on cultural controls, just like prevention, we want good sanitation in the garden. Pick up fallen fruit and nuts before any pests are attracted to them. And then if you do have fungal spores, you can prune those out, prune out the branches and leaves that are affected, and then put them in a bag in the trash. Make sure that the fungus doesn't spread its spores to any of your other plants. So moving on to mechanical controls. Mechanical controls are the physical tools and barriers that we can use in the garden. So and they also can be used in the home, of course. Weather stripping and caulk can keep crawling insects and flying insects out of your home. Screening, like on the top left, that's some hardware cloth that can be used to keep rodents out of your home. Usually we recommend 1/4 inch hardware cloth, and that's hardware cloth is that metal screen that you see. I did just learn that it's recommended for fire-prone areas that instead of 1/4 inch hardware cloth, use a finer 1/8 inch hardware cloth when trying to keep out rodents, because an 1/8 inch hardware cloth will also prevent embers from coming into your home. And then work with barriers. Barriers can be anything that protects your plant or your home from the pest. So bird netting on your fruit trees can keep birds and sometimes squirrels out. Gopher baskets, I highly recommend in the Bay Area. There's gophers everywhere and you're not going to escape them, unfortunately. So if you're planting new plants, you want to use gopher baskets where they're gopher wire in the shape of a basket. You make the hole that's big enough for the basket and you put the plant inside it. That will protect the plant roots and the root ball from being attacked by gophers. Also, if you're installing a raised bed, you want to make sure that you're adding gopher wire or a fine hardware cloth to the bottom of your raised bed to prevent from gophers. That's another prevention. If you know that you're in a gopher area but you don't necessarily see them yet, use the gopher wire because they will come. Screens for your windows to prevent flying insects from coming in your home, and then row cover that's in the top middle. That's a really good tool. It's the cloth that goes over your veggies that can keep flying insects from coming in, birds, snails, a lot of things from coming in, laying eggs on your plants or eating your plants. And then exclusion cages are really can be very effective, especially when keeping out rats or raccoons and other rodents and birds as well. They can be very simple, like the one on the left, which is just hardware cloth draped over some PVC piping, or they can be really beautiful and elaborate, like the one on the right. That's at the Garden for the Environment in San Francisco. They have a major rat problem this season. So a volunteer built these beautiful exclusion cages that have mesh in them, but you can still lift them up, fold them up so that you can access the plants. So they can be really simple or really beautiful and elaborate. Sheet mulching is another barrier that we kind of touched on in addition to mulch. If you have a ton of weeds in your yard or just really tough weeds that you can't get rid of, I recommend before mulching adding 3 or 4 layers of cardboard. You can use newspaper as well. Cardboard is a bit tougher and will be more effective. It breaks down slower. I have oxalis in my yard, so this year I put down 4 layers of cardboard that I got from a neighbor. Make sure it overlaps really well, and then put 3 inches of mulch on top of that. Hopefully the oxalis will keep out for at least a season. They're really tough weeds, so and then eventually the more you sheet mulch, the fewer weeds will come back over time. And over time, the cardboard and the mulch do break down into your soil, but that is good. It's good for your soil, but over time you will have to redo it. And then working with tools, and this is really just hand tools, hoes, weed whackers, hand pulling, hand picking off caterpillars. All these are really effective. They're a little more labor intensive, but they're very effective. Working with traps, you can do a sticky insect trap like the one in the middle, yellow jacket or fly traps like the one on the right, making sure you are adding attractant as the label says, and then gopher traps, mouse traps, rat traps, they're all very effective. And then snail and slug traps have varying effectiveness, but they can be effective with patience. And then moving on to biological controls, this is all about beneficial insects. So we want to bring in the beneficial insects. They will do the work for you if you have a nice healthy population. What we want to focus on is the 3 Ps, the pollinators, the predators, and the parasitic insects. The pollinators are like butterflies and bees that will pollinate our plants and give us fruit. The predators are like spiders or lady beetles or ladybugs, and they will eat a lot of insects, bad insects in the garden. Lady beetles eat aphids, thrips, and scale. And parasitic insects, these are like tiny parasitic wasps that will lay their eggs on caterpillars. And then it's kind of gross, but the eggs will hatch, the larva then will eat the caterpillar from inside out, and it's really gross, but hey, they're doing the dirty work for you. Just a reminder that 90% of bugs in the garden are good bugs, so that's why we want to be really careful with proper identification and very careful with any pesticides we decide to use. Bad bugs are seasonal, but good bugs, at least in our California climate, tend to be year-round, or mostly year-round. You can learn more about specific bugs, including the 10 most wanted bugs in your garden, with the brochure that you can see on the slide at the Our Water, Our World website. And also the fact sheet for healthy gardens also has really good resources about beneficial insects. So to invite our beneficial bugs into the garden, we want to create a diverse habitat for them. What they like is plants with clumps of small flowers, like the one on the bottom right, that's yarrow. They also like alyssum, and then they also like daisy-like or sunflower-like flowers with the ray of petals around a button or a center flower. Some good bugs also like chunky bark, like an arbor mulch that's really chunky, to use as shelter. And then you can buy beneficial bugs like ladybugs at a nursery. But I would say, and then you can bring them, release them into your garden if you have, like, say, an aphid problem. I would say with that, you need to keep in mind that once the food source goes away, like they eat all the aphids, the ladybugs are going to go away. So it's probably better, more cost efficient, cost effective if you invite them into your garden instead of bring them into your garden. And of course, when we're inviting pesticides or releasing them, when we're inviting beneficials and releasing them into our garden, we want to make sure that we're avoiding pesticides, even the eco-friendlies. Birds can be beneficial as well in the garden. 90% of birds do eat bugs at least at some point in their life. So you can let some of your flowering plants go to seed. The birds will enjoy the seeds and use some of the older materials as nesting materials. And then you can offer bird bath, but make sure that you change the water frequently to avoid mosquitoes. And then I would recommend avoiding bird feeders because they do tend to attract rats and squirrels. So lastly, we're going to talk about chemical controls. And this would be pesticides. And of course it's last because it's going to always be our last resort. So a few things to keep in mind. We want to know our target. Again, knowing the importance of knowing the pest that you're targeting. A lot of pesticides are formulated for only one kind of pest, so you want to make sure that we're using the right pesticide. And there are some broad spectrum pesticides. The less eco-friendly ones are more broad spectrum, and they'll just like kill anything in our path, but we want to avoid those. Follow the label instructions carefully. We want to make sure if the pest is not on the label, then we cannot use that pesticide. So read the label carefully. I recommend reading it before you even leave the store, before you buy it. Make sure your pest is on the label. And then the labels do have really important information about how to apply, especially sometimes even certain plants get different applications. So reading the label is very important. We want to choose the less toxic and the eco-friendly pesticides when possible. As I said, eco-friendlies tend to be more narrow spectrum. They have a specific target, and that's what we want. Also, eco-friendlies break down faster, which is also important. And then that way that they won't persist in the environment, get into waterways. When applying pesticide outdoors, we want to spray at the end of the day after the wind dies down, and when there's no rain in the forecast, and also at the end of the day when good bugs are less active. And we also want to take advantage of the dormant season, especially for fruit trees and roses, spraying a horticultural dormant spray or any kind of dormant spray during the dormant season, when there's no leaves, so there's less coverage. We don't have to use quite as much spray. Also, beneficials tend to be less active in the wintertime. And you can get a list of the less toxic products on the Water Our World website. A few more tips for using products. Remember that even eco-friendly products are designed to kill, so they're not risk-free, and there are some hazards that you need to keep in mind. You need to wear PPE. We all know that term now. We need to use our personal protective equipment. Gloves, long sleeves, long pants, a mask, goggles, eye protection. Even the eco-friendly ones can cause irritation. Timing is important. You want to read the label. It can give you some advice on when to best spray. Remember to spot treat. We want to make sure that we want to target the pest only spray when the pest is present. Just try to really focus your spray on the branches that are affected or the leaves that are affected. And then be patient, because less toxic products do tend to take a little longer to work. For example, we're going to talk about this in just a moment with ants in the home. You can use a spray, but they're only going to kill the ants in front of you that you spray directly, whereas an ant bait station is much more eco-friendly, and it will be more effective because the bait will be taken to the colony, and that will it will take a little bit longer, but it will kill the whole colony. And then when you are using pesticides, you want to make sure that you always keep them in their original container. That way you don't mix up the labeling, and you have the proper instructions with them. When you're done, even the eco-friendlies need to be taken to a household hazardous waste collection facility. And in San Mateo County, you can go to this website for more information on waste collection. They do have collection, but it's by appointment, although there's appointments all the time. And there's availability Thursday to Saturday from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. So you can see that website for more information. So right now, some of you might be experiencing ants in the home. This is the season when ants do come in. And ants outside, they are not really a nuisance. They can be good. They're decomposers. They aerate the soil, and they can eat insect pests. One thing to note, they do farm the sticky sweet honeydew that aphids and other pests produce. So they'll protect aphids against beneficials like ladybugs, because ladybugs eat aphids, so ants will protect the aphids or fight off the ladybugs. On the other hand, so that's a downside to ants, but on the other hand, ants can be an indicator of a larger pest problem. So if you see like a trail of ants going up a tree, that's probably a sign that you have some other pest in the tree, and then you can deal with that pest and the ants will go away. So looking at ant solutions from a IPM perspective. So first, we're going to go for prevention. We're going to clean crumbs and water. This is in the home. Most of this is about ants in the home because that's where they cause the most problems. So we're going to clean up crumbs and water. They come in for water as well, not just food. We're going to seal up food or put it in the refrigerator, and we're going to seal any cracks or add weather stripping to our doors and windows. We're going to identify and monitor if we do see ants. Monitor, is it getting worse or is it just one or two? If we decide we need to take action, we can just take a soapy sponge, wipe up any scout ants that come out looking for food, and wipe up their scent trails that they leave. We want to find their point of entry and block it off with caulk or weather stripping, or if it's temporary, you can use just a little bit of petroleum jelly on whatever holes they might be coming in. You also want to find out, what are they coming in for? Are they coming in for food? If they're coming in and eating your pet's food, say your pet doesn't eat all their food at once and there's food on the floor all day, we want to, what you can do is take your pet's food bowl, put it in a wider bowl that has a wider, shallow bowl that has some soapy water in it. It creates a bit of a moat, and the ants can't get in to the food. If we decide that we want to go for a chemical control, I would say ant baits are highly effective, but like I said, they do take a little bit longer than, say, a spray. But ant baits, they're more effective because they kill the whole colony. Ants will come out, find the bait, take the bait, and then bring it back to the colony, which will then kill the whole colony. Whereas a spray kills on contact, it only kills the ants that you're looking at. Orange Guard is a spray, kill on contact. It can also be a repellent though, so if you see ants are coming in through a doorway, you can spray Orange Guard on your door jamb, and that'll repel ants for about a week. When we are working with ant bait stations, we want to look for stations that use boric acid and sugar bait mix. That's the least toxic. And then another option is food grade diatomaceous earth. We want to make sure it's food grade. Diatomaceous earth is a very fine powder, and it can cause the ants to desiccate, to dry up. So what we want to do, if we do want to use that, we want to put a very small amount in cracks or right where they enter. And then keep in mind that diatomaceous earth, while it's food grade and it's not necessarily poisonous, it is a fine powder. So you want to make sure that no ants or children have access to it. It can be a lung irritant. Also, with ant baits, when we are using the ant bait stations, we want to make sure that no pets and no children can access them, because they are, even though they're less toxic, they are pesticide. We don't want anyone chewing on the stations. Outdoor, if you do have them, like I said, you can manage the aphid problem that you might be having. You can also, there are outdoor ant bait stations, also making sure that no pets or children have access to them. And then you can use this insect sticky glue that you can wrap a piece of paper around a tree if you have ants crawling up your tree, and then put some insect glue around the paper, and then the ants will get stuck as they crawl up. And then, of course, our fifth step of the IPM process is to monitor. If it's not, the problem's not going away, we want to maybe try a different solution. Snails and slugs, they are coming soon because it's getting cooler and moister and darker, which is all the things that snails and slugs like. They like cool, moist, and cooler temperatures, moisture, and darkness. So also with a IPM approach, we want to prevent snails and slugs from coming into our yard. We want to avoid certain plants that they like and that they like to hide under, like agapanthus, ivy, lilies. Again, we want to remove debris like we talked about with rats, any pots sitting around that you're not using, or boards, pieces of wood, things that they can hide under during the day. We want to water in the morning, that way that the plants will have time to dry out before nightfall again. And then we want to avoid overwatering also, that again, just to reduce moisture. And as I said, overwatering is bad for your plants anyway. So then we want to ID and monitor. So look for the damage. Snails and slugs cause chewing damage. which can be hard to identify, but that's what they chew. They have chewy mouth parts, and then they also tend to leave slime trails. So if you see around your plants, on your mulch, on the soil, there's like this weird, clear, gooey trail left, it's likely you have snails or slugs. So if we want to take action, cultural control, we want to change their habitat to an unfriendly environment for them. So we remove the debris, anything that they could be hiding under during the day. We want to add, I've heard that they don't like chunky arbor mulch. So you can add more chunky mulch to your garden. And then we want to clear any ivy. For mechanical controls, these can be very effective for snails and slugs. Hand picking, it takes a little work, but it is quite effective. So go out at night or when it gets darker and cooler with a flashlight and look on all sides of your plants and pick off the snails and slugs and put them in some soapy water. One thing to note, I did read that snails and slugs can be a vector for rat lungworm disease, which is a really terrible disease that can affect humans. It hasn't yet been detected in California, but it is a risk. So if you are hand picking, just use gloves. Copper tape and barriers. Slugs and snails don't like crawling across copper. So you can line your pots or your raised beds with some copper tape, and hopefully that'll prevent them. And then you can create a trap using, I know I said remove any boards and flower pots, but you can use a board that you have in your yard as a trap. Put the board down, maybe a little bit above, raised up above the soil, so maybe like a ½ inch or so. The snails will hide under that during the day, the slugs and snails. They like darkness, they don't like heat, so during the heat of the day, they'll go under the board to hide. During that time, you can lift up the board and scrape them off into some soapy water. And then lastly, if you do want to resort to a chemical control, Sluggo or any kind of iron phosphate bait can be very effective and is less toxic. I would avoid any bait that has the ingredient of metaldehyde, as that can be very toxic to dogs. And then lastly, we want to monitor, is the problem going away? Is it getting better? And if it's not getting better, we want to try a different approach. So just to review, we want to focus on prevention, and then we want to properly identify and monitor, decide what our thresholds are for action, and then if we take action, we start with the least aggressive control methods of just keeping a healthy garden, and then we want to avoid chemicals if we can, and use them very sparingly. And then lastly, of course, monitor. Again, our waterourworld.org has all of our fact sheets. It lists less toxic products. We have the 10 most wanted bug brochure on there, and then the Ask the Expert tool. So thank you again to Flows Today in San Mateo County, and thank you all for being here this morning.